No, he's not trying to make anybody. He's trying to give an excuse for when he decides he's going to just opt out.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's fine. I thought it was unmuting.
I've laid the groundwork.
Exactly. Mr. Garris, are you there? Are you available? David?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, there he is.
Okay, you're on?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Thank you for being here. No, he's not trying to make anybody
Linda,
give an excuse.
Linda, are you on the phone?
Just opt out. Yeah. Oh my God, that's fine. I thought it was unmuting.
Donna, I think you might need to mute. Linda, are you on the line? All right, let me get her.
Okay.
Hi, it's Linda.
Hi, Linda. Okay, folks, are we live yet?
We are live.
We are broadcasting. Okay. With that, and everybody having checked in that I need checked in at this moment, at this time, the chair is calling this meeting of the State Board of Elections to order. The chair will, because this is a audio-only call, perform a roll call of the members present. The chair is present. Mr. Hogan, are you present?
Yes, I'm present.
Ms. Howell, are you present?
Yes, I'm present.
Mr. Flynn, are you present?
Yes, I'm present.
Mr. Velp, are you present?
Yes, I'm present.
Thank you all. The chair determines that a quorum has been established. Are there any additions to the agenda? Hearing none and expecting none, we move to item number 3. Everyone has probably noticed this is a very slimmed down agenda, but I think that's appropriate for an emergency meeting. The next item on the agenda is the report on the June 2nd election, which contains the review of November 3rd election options. And I'm going to take a few moments to explain to our listening audience where we are in terms of posture on this particular matter. The State Board was asked to provide a report to Governor Hogan regarding the June elections. This report has actually 3 parts to it. The first part is facts about the June primary. This is historical, and the board has actually already discussed it, not as a written document, but in terms of what happened in June. And generally speaking, the facts are widely known. The second part of the report is a report which deals with options, another way of looking at it, or another term would be courses of action in terms of election modes for November. The third part of the report, which is also not before the board in the sense of being discussed in this meeting, it's tasks for state board and local boards that will be performed regardless of the mode of the election. For example, working on additional ballot drop-off locations and voting centers. That sort of thing is going to occur anyway, but there is a listing of those tasks which we have. What we are here for today, to discuss today, is the November section, or section 2. Now, for context, we are providing options to the governor because first, it appeared implicit in his request for a report, and second, because we are his state agency charged with election matters and have expertise in this field. The state board does not presume, however, to tell the governor what to do. We are setting out various courses of action he may wish to consider. We may or we may not reach a consensus today on a given course of action or option. The governor may, in any event, issue an order blending what we're presenting. Whatever the governor determines, we will execute that decision without hesitation and to the full extent of our capabilities. So, today we will be discussing the various courses of action. For those who have not seen the document, just to quickly lay that out, is that course of action number one, or option number one, is a traditional election. In effect, it is what would have taken place had the pandemic never occurred. Option number two has extensive but not precinct level in-person voting at vote centers up to and including election day. Voters are sent applications for mail-in ballots and strongly encouraged to use them. Option three, the election is a primarily vote-by-mail election like the June 2nd election with voting centers and in-person voting. Now, the voting, the option number three would have fewer voting centers than option number two, but more voting centers than the June election. Now, in addition, I have asked Mr. David Garris, who is the president of the Maryland Association of Election Officials, or MAO, to join us today so that he is available to answer questions regarding the local boards of election and keep us grounded in facts regarding local boards and their capabilities. There are two key realities to the November election. Number one, we have finite resources in personnel, money, physical plant, and time. Number two, we cannot predict the future. We don't know what the in-person voting turnout will be. The voters, as we sit here today, don't know what the in-person voting turnout will be. We're steering a course between the sharpness of too many in-person voting resources and the Scylla of too few in-person voting resources. We can only strive to pull hard on our oars and navigate a straight course. For the record, the members have seen the draft document has been provided to them, and they've also been provided with the various pieces of correspondence we have received from a variety of entities on this matter. Members may see advantages or disadvantages that were overlooked in the drafting and are welcome, indeed expected, to raise them. And with that, we'll move on to discuss this, and I'll open the floor unless there are any sort of procedural type questions.
Mr. Chairman, this is PJ.
Yes, yep.
I'm looking under option 3. Says the election is primarily vote by mail election like the June 2nd election with vote centers for in-person voting. Doesn't have any mention of early voting at those voting centers.
I think
is that not an option in option 3?
No, it is an option. I think when the term vote centers is used, it was a drafting choice of verbiage, and because there won't be precinct level voting in that option, the voting centers would also transition into being voting centers on election day. So there wouldn't be the distinction as in a traditional election where you would have early voting centers and then at some point before election day, they would shut down and then the precinct level voting sites would open up. In this instance, the voting centers would just continue, whatever they were, they would continue on. It may be that there would be an effort to try to increase the number on election day, but that's why the term voting centers was used rather than early voting and election day voting, to show that there wouldn't be a transitional state. The same entity would continue to operate all the way through.
No, I understand that. I just want to make sure it's clear that in each of these options, what's included. And if someone was to read option 3, they would have no idea that there's early voting considered.
And we'll correct that and I think I mentioned it, and as we all know, this is a draft. That's why we're discussing it as a draft. And I'm sure Nikki's already made a note of that. And we'll correct that in the final form tonight or tomorrow morning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, deafening silence. Do the board members have feelings for or against any of the options?
Can I clarify one thing?
Absolutely.
The governor would basically give us I want it to be mail or hybrid, and then we implement, so all the insides, just speak to what PJ said, how many vote centers, how they are, how the mail goes out, whether it flows through, whether it's returned or not. All that stuff is things we can give direction to. Is that your understanding as well?
I think the way the governor has presented these taskings in the past have been very broad, kind of mission-oriented, leaving it up to the state and local boards to implement the broad guidance. He may or may not elect to do it that way in this instance. I think the reason we ended up with options to be discussed was severalfold, and any responsibility for it belongs on my shoulders. Credit should be spread out to other people, but the responsibility falls on me. To say to a decision maker, here's what you should do, both from my training and experience, is presumptuous. And that's not what we're really getting paid to do. What we're getting paid to do is to tell the governor, here's what we see as the environment, the situation that we're going to be facing for a November election. And we're going to have to make trade-offs. So if you want to mail out ballots and you're going to have this large number of ballots that are going to have to be canvassed, then resources have to go over to that. And those resources may have to come out of having larger numbers of voting centers. If, on the other hand, you want to go with mailing out applications, then you're going to have a robust voting center type situation. Now, we already have information, I know the board members are aware of this. Mayo has provided us with an excellent document setting out the perspective of the local boards in terms of their resources, what they could and could not reasonably expect to do, to be able to, their capabilities, in other words. And we know right now that there are concerns about whether we'll have enough volunteers. And I was very surprised by the number. I don't know why, but I was. Mayo indicated there was 25,000, I believe is the number, volunteers at 1,700 election sites. And so if you're doing one thing, you can't be doing another. And that was one of Mayo's points in their letter. If you have us do one thing, you can't have us do the other. The reason that we put the options in was to show the governor, here's one way of doing it, here's another way of doing it, here's a third way of doing it, the 3 election modes. They all have advantages and disadvantages. If we get into a situation where we are banking on sending out ballots and people are going to return the ballots in huge numbers, I think we have 2 million put in there, and there was a last minute discussion that the number actually could be upwards like 3 million or 4 million ballots going out. So you have to be prepared for that. If you do that with the finite resources, then pivoting when you get into October and you realize that the public health concerns are simply not prevalent amongst voters, that they're just going about their normal business. What they do, they do. They go out, they go out. If they go to a store, they go to a store. And if they're the people that like to go vote in person, then that may be what they'll do. So if you're focused on one mode and the electorate decides to exercise a different mode, the pivot between those two, by the time you realize it, could be difficult. So we ended up basically saying, here's the 3 ways an election can take place in our state. And this is what we think the advantages and disadvantages, the potential pitfalls of each one are. This is actually a much more difficult decision than the April or June elections, in my mind. And the reason was we were in the throes of the pandemic in the sense that there was an extremely heightened sense of insecurity. As that sense of insecurity diminishes, and we all hope it does because we hope the public health gets better, but as it does, people may revert back to their normal modes. So I'm not sure that the June election is in fact a blueprint for the November election. On the other hand, maybe it is. Maybe people like having these ballots, and we're going to draw enough of them off by sending ballots that we're not going to get overwhelmed at the polls. But one thing that came through from Mayo, and they are our best indicator of ground truth in this regard, is that we're on very shaky territory in trying to run a traditional 1,700 site, 25,000 volunteer election in November. That led to the 2 other options. Do you go with applications and expect turnout? Do you go with ballots hoping to keep the turnout, and I mean turnout by physical presence, to keep that down? Because that's what the ballots are expected to do. Did that answer your question, Bill? Because I may have missed it and gone on too long.
You answered my question and more. Thank you.
Sorry about that part.
No problem.
So anyone else? Thoughts about this?
Well,
Mike.
go ahead, Malcolm.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead, PJ.
I was trying. was busy listening to your answer to Bill, and I think you asked the question, do the members have a preference of the three options? Are you asking for that answer right now or at the end of this meeting?
I would say go ahead and answer it now because it'll contribute to the discussion.
Okay, that being posed, after everything I've read, looked at, researched, experienced, of those three options, I'll just go right to it. I support option 3, and we can talk about it in great detail as far as what all would be involved in option 3. But I just cannot sit here today and think that we can have a option 1 regular election. I just don't see how that's possible. You said it a couple times. We'll hear it over and over again. Hopefully, this pandemic is under control by November. Look, we know there's not going to be a vaccine by November. That is, I've yet to hear any health expert in the world think we're going to have a vaccine by November. I've heard lots of health experts say, we're seeing spikes in different places. Knock on wood, I think, and I said this at the last meeting, I think the Governor Hogan's done a phenomenal job in Maryland. I think we are way ahead of the game as far as controlling this pandemic. But I also heard Dr. Fauci this morning say right now the country is experiencing 40,000 cases per day. He said he would not be surprised if it's 100,000 cases a day in the near future. I don't see it getting better given the fall and what comes with that, the regular flu season. I think we learned a number of lessons from the June 2nd primary, lessons that we can improve upon if that's the mode the governor decides. So that's how I feel.
Thank you, PJ. Malcolm?
Yes, thank you. I always look at elections as we want to get as many people as possible out to vote. And we should not put obstacles in the path. And even though some people tend to look at wanting to restrict people to vote, and looking at the situation that we have, as PJ mentioned, Maryland has done a phenomenal job in containing things. But I've been keeping a running total for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And presently, we're averaging about 300 contacts a day. We're up to 67,500 some as of this morning. And I think we are 11th in the nation in the number of contacts with the virus. Deaths is only 3,060. I shouldn't say only, but it's 3,062. That's increasing at a smaller rate. And we were going in the negative in hospital beds, but in the last day or two, that's increased. It's gone up by 4 or 5 a day. That being said, the pandemic is still here. It's not going away. And as a result of that, I do not see option 1 as an option because we'll never get there. And I was looking at the Mayo report, and it said we would require 25,000 election judges. Look at the election judges. Majority of the election judges are within my generation, the vulnerable generation, 60 or older, because most of them, I would say the majority of them are retirees. We would require 25,000 in a normal situation. I don't think we'll get 25,000 in the present situation that we're in now. And the best way that I can see of contacting all voters, give them the opportunity to vote, is to send them ballots. If they want to mail them back in and do it, they can do that. If they don't want to do that, then they can take their ballot and they can go to a early voting center or go to a voting center and vote in person if they want to take that option or that chance. But at least they have a choice. We're not limiting their choices. And as a result of that, in option 2, it seems like it's creating more work, because if you send out an application, then you have to respond to the application and then send out a ballot. Why go through all that process? I would think that the easiest method to me would be option 3. Send everybody a ballot, open up early voting centers 2 or 3 days before the election. If they want to vote in person and take the chance, they can do that. Have drop boxes, they can do that. Or they can vote on the election day, or they can mail the ballots in. And that allows the greater majority of citizens the opportunities to vote. Now, I know the last election we had some issues about long lines, and the question came back to the State Board of Elections. But to me, the question of long lines is an issue with the local board, because they have to select a location that can accommodate a number of polling places, a number of machines. And I thought it was interesting. I was looking at Kentucky. They had one polling place in all of, Louisville, I believe it was. And it seemed like it was in an auditorium. They had like 300, 400 machines. They did not have long lines because people just going in and out. And if we limit a place or a location that can only accommodate 10 or 20 machines, you're going to have lines. So people are going to take the time. And it's going to be difficult to find locations that can accommodate a number of machines, because during the pandemic, you're going to have a lot of public buildings that are going to be closed. I don't know if they'd be able to open them up. And so we have limitations there. I don't want to say it, but we have to expect long lines based upon facilities that will be available to us. But that in itself, I think if you look at most people, a lot of them don't mind staying in the lines if they're going to vote. That being said, make a long story short, I think option 3, but adding the point that we have early voting centers available under option 3.
Thank you, Malcolm. Bill, Kelly?
I'm happy to go first. I've thought a lot about this and had a number of conversations, and I believe that I concur with my fellow colleagues that have already spoken that logistically, it would not be possible, in my estimation and experience, to have a regular election with, I forget how many precincts there are statewide, but the bigger counties have 200-300 precincts alone, each county. And I do not believe that we'll be able to get 27,000 workers to hold a traditional election. I believe that is nearly impossible. And part of the problem is you have to make decisions on elections far in advance of when it actually is. I mean, all the people now that are questioning, even the June 2nd election, why we didn't have more vote centers and why we had to do mail, quite frankly, it's insulting. Because if they would have sat in the same meetings that we did when we were told that the pandemic was going to peak July 4th, if you all remember that, there was no other decision we could have made. And we had a lot of robust debate at the time of how many vote centers, ranging from 0 to we ended up with 1 to 4. I believe that going forward, the way to do this is to have a hybrid election. And I believe I have an issue with mailing a ballot to every eligible voter. I believe that the number is somewhere around 10% get returned. I believe that number contrary, I know Malcolm had said that we might have more voters that way. I believe personally the way it was done will have less voters because the mail does not forward when you're sending a ballot. It's bouncing. And those 10% who may have moved to someone else and not given their forwarding address yet, like maybe they moved from one county to another or one address in the same county to another, would not get a ballot that way. They would have to go above and beyond. So I like the idea of mailing an absentee ballot application to each eligible voter. But I would say that should be forwardable mail, not return mail, and that we would stress extremely in that mailing with the absentee ballot application that they should, instead of using that application, they should go online and request a ballot using the online tool to request a ballot and have a campaign around that so that we minimize to a very minimum the actual applications that would come in that would have to be processed at the LBE level, and clearly state the deadline for when to request a ballot through that online tool. And then I would set up, I believe, all of the early voting sites in each county have early voting, have no down days, run it all the way through election day, and have it open still on election day. And then I would query each LBE and ask them how many additional sites, do they have have locations for, and B, have staff that they can operate, how many additional sites they would be able to handle. They might, for instance, say, well, we're going to use all the county high schools because they're larger locations and we can staff them. And they're strategically located. So we would have the early voting sites open on election day plus the high schools or something like that. And then we would have drop-off boxes at all of the sites on election day so that those who got a ballot, who were trying to vote in person, could drop them in there as long as cameras could watch them. And they would, of course, be up in all the early voting sites. I would make sure that the ballots that we sent out for the absentee ballots had a flap on them to protect so that the person's name, party affiliation, any other information couldn't be seen. So I am a proponent of option 2.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, this is Kelly. I agree with all of my colleagues that option 1 is not feasible. There are just too many unknowns right now, and I think it would be a mistake to try to have a traditional election on election day. I agree with Bill. I think that option 2 is preferable to option 3. I had an experience that was very similar to the experience that a lot of people in Maryland had. And that was, there were 2 blank ballots that showed up in my mailbox for people who have not lived in my home for 5 years and 7 years, respectively. And both of those blank ballots are sitting right next to me here in my office. It would have been very easy for me to fill out those ballots, put some sort of scratch in the signature mark, and send them back. I think we were lucky. We did what we had to do in the primary and we got away with it. But if we flood the state with unmarked ballots, it's just guaranteed there's going to be fraud. Guaranteed. And doesn't take a lot of it to undermine the public's confidence. So I think we're much better off sending forwardable mail, as Bill recommended, to registered voters, telling them how the election is going to be conducted, advising them to apply for an absentee ballot either using the paper or online, and advising them that there will be in-person voting opportunities during early voting all the way up through election day. I think that makes the most sense. So I support option 2.
Okay. Anyone have any thoughts having heard various perspectives? I'm not trying to incite any arguments here, but
Well, yeah, I'd like
let's
to know what the
debate.
things.
Go. I have never been a proponent of mailing the ballots out. And my position about election security goes back since I've been sitting on the board. My concerns about vulnerabilities, about how things can go awry. The idea of sending out literally millions of live ballots, even 10% of which, and I don't know if that's a good number, but at least a statistically significant number of them, they go out and the people who receive them, just hang on to them. Now, other than Kelly, and we have really solid information there, it's anecdotal. We don't have any knowledge really at this moment of how many ballots might have gone astray. We could probably figure out how many ballots were not voted, but that's not the same thing.
Mr. Chair, we actually do have data, I believe, on how many ballots were returned back to each LBE on what was mailed out, and it's a pretty significant number because of address changes.
And I agree with you. That number we have. What we don't know is why. Well, I understand what you're saying, but we don't know what. We can't go down into the fine details. We don't know how many would-be voters never received a ballot, and the ballots were returned without their knowledge, and they just didn't know, and they didn't vote. I mean, we never have 100% turnout. We only have 90% turnout or 80% turnout. So there's a lot of people that we know simply don't vote. Unfortunately, but we know that exists. So what I was trying to say, and I probably didn't say it well, is that we have some data, but we don't necessarily have the critical data. And I would note that one of the distinctions between what Maryland is doing and what the vote by mail states are doing is substantial, because we're playing pickup ball when you come down to it. And, the phrase I think we used back around April, May was a snap kick. The states that use it, and I'm not a big fan of that either, but nevertheless, the states that use it have signature verification systems set up and so on. We have none of that. And we know we have none of it, and everybody else knows we have none of it, because it's not what we do. So simply sending these ballots out, and I did ask the question the other day, what kind of races are on it, all the ballots statewide. And for the most part, there are some races and down ballot, very down ballot, in some jurisdictions that could be impacted by local fraud. This is what we apparently are seeing out of Paterson, New Jersey, where the election went completely off the rails. And none of us want to see that happen here. I'm not saying that anybody is being cavalier about it or anything else. I mean, for those of us who are involved in this process, it sends sort of I think a chill right down your back, that you're involved in something and it goes that far off the rails. At least here, I don't know about New Jersey. So the ballot going out really, really bothers me. I understand also, though, the point Mayo made to us, which was that if you've got to take care of all these, or have the staff taking care of a variety of things, it diminishes, it makes it more difficult for you to prepare for, large numbers of in-person voting. And of course, that's what looms over the whole thing in any event. Go ahead, go.
I thought you were finished. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I think that option 2 is more scalable than option 3. Because you're already looking for larger numbers of sites and larger numbers of workers, and you have some ability to scale up. I'm not sure that option 3 is as scalable. Though, if you did it right, it may be. From the way Malcolm was explaining what his thought process was, and if you're getting these large sites, it would be more scalable. I mean, this huge space, you only have to need a quarter of it, but if you have to scale up, you could use half of it or 3/4 of it or whatever. So that's a piece of data that would apply across the options. So I think the key is, do we cripple the local boards by having the application set out? In other words, have we placed them in a position where they can't really function well? And that's what I worry about. And because I'm worried about it, Mr. Garris, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'm sure you've been listening to what we've been saying, since it so directly affects everything you do. My concern is, are we going to impair the local boards if we use an application system such that they will come up short in other areas?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm sorry, this is PJ. Before we get to Mr. Garris, I wanted to make a couple comments.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to cut him off, but this idea of forwarding, you all know that the post office does not forward mail forever. It's a maximum of 12 months. I don't know how, how many people move, every 12 months, but even people that supposedly do the forwarding, it's not perfect. And I don't mind discussing factual data in making our decisions, but I worry about interspersing in this discussion unproven theories. I mean, first of all, voter fraud is a crime. It's a crime in the state of Maryland. I'm sure it's a crime in all 50 states, for someone to fill out those ballots. You cited Paterson, New Jersey. I guess there is a criminal investigation going on. Thank God. Kelly stated that, I tried to write it down, that she feels that by mailing ballots out, it will guarantee fraud. I don't want to put words in your mouth. That's what I thought I heard. I'm not aware of any allegations of fraud in the June 2nd election, and we mailed 3.5 million ballots. Are we mailing more ballots? Would we be mailing more ballots for the general election? The number I hear is 4 million. Yes, but the difference between 3.5 million and 4 million. I have tried to study this, and there are volumes of research and studies at both the Brennan Center for Justice, as well as the Brookings Institute, that debunk this myth of wide-scale voter fraud. Are there any guarantees? No, there's no guarantees in life. But I read, I don't mean it to be a pithy statement, but one study said you're more likely to be struck by lightning than impersonating someone's vote. So I hope we can just stick to the facts of what we know versus what we don't know for sure.
Well, this is Kelly. Voter fraud is notoriously difficult to prove, except in small numbers. And it does happen. It doesn't often happen on a large scale, but it does sometimes. And people do get caught and they do get prosecuted. And I don't know how I would be caught if I voted the 2 ballots that are here at my house. How would I be caught? Unless somebody at the Board of Elections knows me, or somebody who knows my family takes the time to look it up and see, oh, I know those 2 young men haven't lived in Maryland for 7 years. Let's see if they voted. I mean, you'd have to really have inside information in order to know where to look in order to find the fraud. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And I've heard from other people who received blank ballots for people who don't live in their home either. So I know I'm not the only one, and I know others have experienced that. And I think a general election tends to be more heated than a primary. People get more emotional, more irrational. And I think pressure on people to vote a blank ballot that's just sitting right there, whether it's a blank ballot that just arrived at your apartment for the person who used to live there, or whether it's a blank ballot that arrived for a family member who doesn't live there anymore. I know it's a crime, but it's got to be, the person has to be caught first and has to be proved before you get to the point of actually enforcing the law. And flooding the state with millions of unmarked ballots that aren't in the custody of the Board of Elections and aren't being sent out in response to a request from an actual voter who intends to vote and wants to vote, we're just asking for trouble.
So the 5 states that do vote by mail have fraud?
No, vote by mail. My family is from Oregon, so I'm familiar with it. They've been doing it since, I think, 2000 or so. And they have very sophisticated software that reads the voter's signature when the ballot is returned. We don't have that in Maryland. So we don't even have, as far as I know, we don't even have untrained workers visually comparing the signature on the returned ballot to the signature that's on file. Whereas in Oregon, they have sophisticated software that kicks it out. If a ballot comes back and the signature on the ballot doesn't match the signature on the file with the Board of Elections, it kicks it out. And an investigation goes forth from there before that ballot is counted. So we have no protection in Maryland. We don't even have a witness requirement on the signature. Nothing. I mean, literally just put a scratch mark in the signature box and you're good to go.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, PJ. I think one of the factors that we're touching on here also is voter confidence and in the elections process, and that's been mentioned a number of times by a number of different entities that have communicated with us. And I guess one of those would be this type of scenario. Not, you know, if we're looking purely at voter confidence and a particular voter or group of voters, some number of voters receive ballots that shouldn't be coming to them, then they may think, well, if it's happening to me, it's happening, you know, other places, and, you know, I'm not too sure about this whole thing. So there's voter confidence as well as fraud, and I hadn't actually thought of that before in that context. But let me take a moment here and go to Mr. Garris. And David, you on?
Yes, thank you. Respectfully, representing the local boards of elections, we oppose option 2, and we favor option 3. One of the things to keep in mind is that if we mail out voter registration applications, we're going to need to process them. Experience has taught us we won't receive the applications back in a timely manner from the voters. The voters will wait until virtually the end weekend, the end date to send us their applications back. So what we will run into is a situation where our large LBEs, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Baltimore City, are going to be running into a situation where they might have 100,000 pieces of paper or 100,000 applications that they need to process in order to mail a ballot timely. And they might not be able to timely process all those applications. So we risk running into a situation where voters send us their application and it's not processed timely. They don't get their ballot timely, so they can't get it mailed back to the Board of Elections in time to be canvassed. So that's point number one for that. Point number two is that
can I ask you a question about your first point?
Sure.
Would you think Mayo would look more favorably upon it if either A, we had an effort in that mailing not to just send an application, but to push them to process online, or B, maybe just send a mailing without the application where they can either do it online or request an application on the phone?
Anything you can do to streamline the application process via web portal or something like that is going to help the LBEs, in particular the large LBEs. Handling paper, especially in the quantity and the scale that you're looking at right before a presidential election, is going to be a backbreaker, and it's going to risk the ability of the large, particularly Montgomery, Baltimore, PG, to successfully be able to manage the election, because you have to have so many people and so much of your staff dedicated just to processing those ballots and getting them out. And you're going to run into the fact that there's a physical limit of the number of applications you can process at the last minute and ballots you'll be able to send out. So anything you can do to mitigate that is going to be, is going to help a lot. But that said, we're still going to be in a position where if we push them towards the web, I got some statistics from Montgomery County. Their web delivery ballots was 35% of their ballots returned in 2018. That was about 17,000 ballots out of 48,000 mailed. And they didn't finish canvassing till after Thanksgiving. So in this kind of scenario where they have to duplicate all these ballots, they're going to run a real risk where they're still going to be canvassing and the Electoral College is going to be meeting. You know what I mean? The certification of the results is going to become into question. So it's a serious concern.
This is Kelly. I share your concern about having to duplicate internet ballots. I think that's a real risk, and I'm reluctant to encourage people to use internet delivery. What I was thinking is more along the lines of moving the dates up. I don't know when we send out the applications, but it would at least be, I would think, 60 days before the election, because ballots are ready 45 days before the election. And the deadline for requesting an absentee ballot, I don't know what that is, but it could be moved back so it's earlier. In the letter, we could advise people that if you need to vote by mail, please get your application in as soon as possible, because if you wait to the last minute, we may not be able to get one to you. And that we need to keep in mind that that's just for people who must or really want to vote absentee ballot. If you don't get an absentee ballot because you procrastinated until the last minute and the local board was overwhelmed, there are still vote centers, early voting, not just 8 days, but all the way up, 10 days until election day itself. So there are still options for voting, even if someone wasn't able to get an absentee ballot because they waited until the last minute. But what do you think, David, about changing the deadline for applying for an absentee ballot?
In the hypothetical that you do use an application, mail them as soon as possible. Give the voters and give the LBEs the time to process them. So
Yeah.
if it has to be that way, send them by September. Send them to the entire state by September, beginning of September. But one thing to also keep in mind that in our discussions from the administrative side is voter confusion. If we mailed everyone a ballot in the primary without an application and then turn around and require an application for the general election, we're going to be dealing with voter confusion. And how well is the public going to respond to that?
Yeah, I think that's an argument for keeping our communication as clear and simple as possible.
No matter what, we're outside of our normal way we do things. So that's we're going to have to communicate no matter what.
I would. This is Mike. Go ahead, Malcolm.
No, well, I was just going to say, changing the process like this, it's going to add confusion no matter how much communication we had, because we had a lot of communication and it was still confusion. I know I had a couple of people here where I work. They waited until the day before the election to even send in or even look at their ballot. And they called me and they couldn't even find the envelope because they put that aside someplace else. And I said, well, did you read the instructions? They said, yeah, but we put it aside. And a lot of times people will get mailings and you can send it to them early. And they say, oh, the election's not until November. I'll put it aside. Even though you may have written in bold all over there, take care of it immediately. People will not do that. And Bill, you mentioned using the internet. A lot of people don't use the internet. A lot of people may have the internet, but they won't use it for this purpose. And we found out that there was a big lack of the internet when we found out that when it went under this pandemic and students had to work remotely, the difficulties that they had there. So trying to rely on doing this electronically, I don't think you're going to get those many voters. And if you send them one instruction, the last election, you send them one instruction as the ballot, and you send them another instruction, say, well, if you want a ballot, send it back to us. And they may procrastinate and wait till the last minute. Again, it's a matter of delaying, I feel, but no matter what you do, you can send out as much communication. You can put it on television, you can put it on the radio. People still will not do it. They will still be confused, unfortunately.
Yeah. Thank you, Malcolm. I think the point I was going to make was that, and I've said this actually for a number of weeks now, we spent I don't know how many $1 million training Maryland voters to respond in a particular way. And now we're going to ask them to do it a different way. And the problem is that just like what Malcolm described, there's going to be a percentage of these voters that just aren't focused on it, and they are not. They knew what they did last time, and so they're just going to do that this time. And then all of a sudden, maybe they open the envelope, or they look, or they do whatever, or they ask Malcolm, and they say, "Hey, wait a minute! Last time we did it this way," and he's saying, "No, we changed it. Did you read the stuff?" Well, I didn't have time. And that's real. We really have trained the voters to do something, and we really are in the process of talking about changing that training. And that's one of my concerns as well, and it has been for several weeks now. I'm in the position where I actually agree with everybody. Yeah, that's...
What office are you running for, Mike?
Well, I can tell you it wouldn't be chairman of the State Board of Elections during a pandemic. That much I can guarantee. And there's a lot of other jobs I wouldn't want during a pandemic either. Yeah, because as we started to drill down on this, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to, and why I assumed responsibility, credit to a lot of people, responsibility on me, to try to have this discussion and to provide courses of action to the decision maker, because it was clear, it's been clear now for some time, that we were going to have enormous issues in running this election, because the June election wasn't what we would have wanted. It never was. We did what we had to do. The April election too. And now we're coming up on another one, and we are in somewhat different but worse circumstances, because now, in addition to everything else, we got to predict the future. At least in the other elections, the time frame was so short to pivot to those changed elections that, we didn't have any choices to speak of. We had robust discussions about it, but at the end of the day, we were in the throes. I think it was 74 days between the June election and the proclamation, and we all know that's kind of the blink of an eye for the elections process. We're a little better off from this, but not much. So that's why I end up agreeing with points on both sides. But the discussion is valuable. The information is valuable because there's things that we know and the resources that we tap into that allows us to know to ask a lot of these questions as well as get answers to them. And that's what makes this whole process valuable. I'm hoping it makes it valuable for the decision maker. So, anybody else have any? David, did you finish? Or did you have other points you wanted to make?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. We, at the local boards, we will be successful. We are always working very hard to be successful. But we do favor option 3 over option 2 with regards to how we conduct this coming election. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate you joining the call. The one thing that I actually do have confidence in election is actually the people, the state and local boards. That's where I have my confidence. Everything else, not so much. Any other members have any other thoughts, comments, questions, observations, or yes, go.
This is Bill. Sorry. I want to say that, of course, as well with all of my colleagues. I think I have been impressed and continue to be impressed with the thoughtfulness and the care that each of the other 4 members of the board take in what they think and how they portray that. And I appreciate that. And I think that, and I hear the concerns. I hear Malcolm's concerns. I heard PJ's concerns, and I think they're valid. I think that there is no good road to go down. Both of the roads are not ideal, and I have a problem from multiple reasons for mailing ballots to every eligible voters, having to do with some things Kelly said, having all these ballots floating around without being able to check signatures. And to PJ's point, it's anecdotal, and I get that because we don't have the evidence. But I do not believe that just because something is a crime, people don't do it. If that was true, we wouldn't need the police, right? There would be no more murders. But people do things and get caught. It happens all the time. And the problem with an election is, just like a murder, you can't unring the bell. So if there was ballot harvesting, or if there was, even in very close, if this were a gubernatorial election and we were deciding a county council race or one of those. I've been in a race that the difference was 24 votes at the end of the day. So you don't have to swing many to make a difference. So there's a lot of different reasons. I don't like the idea of mailing ballots to everybody. I hear what Mayo was saying, and I think that there is a compromise there where, and to Malcolm's point, I believe that either if we provided the application, then they'd already have it. You wouldn't have to go on the internet, or you provided a way for them to make a phone call to get their ballot coming. You wouldn't, ballot or ballot application coming to them. You wouldn't have to have the internet. And certainly one could argue that any of the method 2 or 3 are easier in effect than voting in person. So that's what I'll have to say.
Thank you, Bill.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
This is PJ. I have a question for Mr. Garius. On page 2 of your letter, number 3, in-person voting should be available at each jurisdiction's normal number of early voting locations, beginning Thursday through Tuesday, November 3rd. Do you think, and I'm sorry if I missed it somewhere else in the letter, do you think we should have more in-person voting centers than just the number of early voting centers we have approved for each jurisdiction?
This is Mike. Let me jump in and add to that question. Not only do you think we should, do you think we're capable? And that's the additional part of the question. Dave, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm looking on page 2, number 3. So first off, since you mentioned it, we do recommend running early voting from Thursday through Election Day. So if you recall how in the previous elections, early voting would, there'd be that weekend between the end of early voting and Election Day. We favor just going straight through. In terms of vote centers, it's a county by county decision. We favor giving that decision to the county to make a recommendation to the State Board of Elections. For instance, some counties may want to increase the number of sites that they use for vote centers. I'm thinking if you have a geographically large county where typically they might only have 1 or 2 vote centers, but 1 or 2 early voting sites, but then they might want to move a 3rd vote center into a corner of the county to get more coverage. And then in other LBEs, you already have very good coverage with the existing early voting sites. So I'd say we would favor leaving that as a decision to the local boards, or allow the local boards to make a recommendation to the State Board of Election for approval.
This is PJ again. Thank you for that. 2 points. I think, and this applies to both option 2 and option 3. I think having Saturday and Sunday voting is a great idea. As far as the additional in-person voting sites, in addition or beyond the normal number of early voting locations, I don't mind local, the LBEs telling the state board how many they would like and where they're going to be. I just want to make sure that they are extremely sensitive to covering the geography of a jurisdiction and not leaving areas out. That was a complaint from the June 2nd election in some jurisdictions. But thank you for your answer.
This is
Go ahead, Nikki.
If I could jump in. So if you are thinking of putting in the report about the window of time, whether it's as Mayo proposes going straight through or having a break, I think there's some technical impacts on the process that we may or may not be able to do if it runs through. So for example, we would typically release results at 8 p.m. For some portion of early voting. We wouldn't be able to do that if early voting runs from some point straight through election day. And so I just raise this as I don't know that we have identified any technical issues that have early voting run straight through election day, because we typically have that 4-day break in between.
Okay. Thank you, Nikki.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Go, PJ.
Question for Nikki. I heard what you just said, have that break so you can, canvass, count, whatever you want to call it, to release at 8 p.m. I'll be honest with you, I don't care about, I'd rather get it right than this desire to, release some results. It's not the final results anyway, at 8 p.m. on election day. And I say that as somebody who was on the ballot 4 times. Yeah, I wanted the results as quickly as possible, but I want, and we got criticized for putting inaccurate results on the website on the June 2nd primary. So I just don't want that idea of having ballots counted to be released, those results released at 8 p.m. To drive a decision. I think that the benefits of having Saturday and Sunday voting for people that, there are a lot of people unemployed, but there are a lot of people working. And who knows what November is going to be like. Give them that option if they absolutely have to vote in person or have to register to vote and vote. So I just don't want that release time of 8 p.m. to dictate other decisions.
And that's fine. Just wanted to understand that there could be consequences that we haven't talked about. Just wanted to throw it in there as something to consider.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this is Mike.
If I could add to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
It has been my experience that the early voting sites are, the votes are canvassed or run during the day on election day. So those machines, when if I remember, were always sequestered and under lock and seal. And we broke those seals, sometime Tuesday afternoon and had those numbers and then had them uploaded to the state on election day. So I would think that could still occur because you're only running numbers at that point. You're not actually canvassing ballots. So that's all.
Well, I think the thought is that if under the Mayo proposal, early voting would start the Thursday before the election and run through election day. So the same equipment would be used Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So your scenario, you're right, the early voting equipment was returned to the local board. But in this case, it would be the same equipment being used all the way through 8 p.m. on election day.
Although it doesn't have to be. We could swap out equipment because it's less sites. It's not like you're doing 187 sites, I would suppose, we'd have plenty of equipment to do that if we needed to.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Nikki. I would also just emphasize one of the things that Nikki mentioned, well, really Bill. Normally we're pivoting in a regular traditional election, we're pivoting from early voting into the precinct level voting. In this scenario, in really any of the viable scenarios, there is no pivot. It just goes straight through. So if there was some requirement somewhere that says we have to get those votes posted up, that's an administrative thing, and I think we can have that moved aside under the circumstances of this election. And the fact that we don't need to pivot into a precinct level election lets those activities go straight through. And I think we all want them to go straight through. So, anyone else? Questions, thoughts? Linda, do you have any thoughts that you would like to add to the conversation?
Thank you very much, Mike. I just want to echo a couple of points that have been said. As you all know, my office's job is to administer the election according to the law and the executive proclamation, and I'm confident that we can, and the local boards can do what's required. And like many of you, I have some concerns about each one of the options. As been stated, option one, can we get enough polling places and poll workers? Option two, the Mayo's concern about lack of capacity at the staff level to handle all of that. Option three, we've never done this before in a general election, let alone a presidential general election in Maryland. So each one of them has a lot of challenges, but as you all know, people in elections do what we have to do. We try to make it happen as best as we possibly can. So I look forward to hearing what you all have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Does anybody have any final comments? No. I'll go through and just see and ask if each of the members desires to state an option they prefer or prefer to make a more generalized statement about their position. And as I usually do, I will start with our most recent addition to the board, and that would be Mr. Velt.
Yeah, although I understand the challenges with each, and I agree with what Linda just said wholeheartedly, and recognize there is no easy path or way to go, my vote would still be not to mail everybody a ballot and instead have them request ballots. So I would be okay with option B or 2.
Thank you. Mr. Fun.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is no optimum option. All of them have issues and problems. However, I look at my overall concern, and my overall concern is to make sure that every citizen has a right to vote, and there should be no hindrance in them having that ability to vote. Even if there may be an opportunity of someone committing fraud, that should not deny a person the opportunity to obtain their vote. So I would like to go with option 3, but also to include in option 3 that we would have early voting centers.
Thank you, Mr. Fun. Ms. Powell.
Yes, I support option 2, getting the letter out to people along with an application in early September, urging people to apply as early as possible if they want to vote by mail. I realize that this is not a perfect solution. I also realize that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. There are all sorts of different ways for people to access the ballot. And I know that there are lots of procrastinators who will put off to the end. We can give them fair warning and do what we can to help them, but even if they aren't able to get a ballot that way, they still have the option of voting in person. I just do not want to flood the state with unmarked ballots. I think that's asking for trouble. And we did it because we had to in June. I think we did the best job that could possibly have been done. There was no way to do it perfectly, and we didn't, but we did it very well. And I think we were lucky. I think luck played a big part in it, too, in addition to the hard work. And I don't want to take that chance in the general. It's a presidential election. People pay a lot more attention. There's a lot more turnout. There's a lot more passion. And I'd much rather see absentee ballots sent to actual voters who've actually requested it. So I support option 2.
Mr. Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I stated my reasons at the beginning why I support option 3, but just some additional points. I actually think the June 2nd primary, because of the incredible hard work and dedication of the State Board of Election staff and the local boards of election, I thought it went very well. Were there some errors that need to be fixed? Absolutely. And we learned from those, whether it's the print and mail house needs to be corrected, to the posting of results. We learned those lessons. And I agree that I think this is November 3rd is going to be probably an unprecedented turnout. And for me, given the pandemic situation, given the unprecedented turnout, I actually think that's all the more reason to to mail everyone a ballot and encourage them, avoid the lines, drop your ballot in the mail, drop it in a drop box, come to early voting centers and drop it off. Be able to have the early voting centers so people can register to vote. I've been involved in elections for 30 plus years. Every election, there's complaints about lines at some, certain precincts around the state. If they think there were lines before, imagine the lines they're going to have now. And human nature as it is, I really worry about sending everybody an absentee application and then people, the vast majority procrastinate. I support option 3.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. As I've said before, as has been echoed by other members, each of these has issues that are good and issues that are bad. I am concerned about sending ballots out, and that concern historically for me would be fraud. But as we have delved down in this and my thinking has turned to it, voter confidence is one of the phrases that has been used over the last few weeks. I'm not sure that voters have confidence in an election if they're seeing ballots crop up for people that aren't there. And so voter confidence is an issue. But for me, even with those two, the bigger issue is, and I think, maybe proved wrong, I think that we're going to send this to the governor. Governor's going to make a decision. I have no idea what that decision would be, and having been involved with this now for weeks, I don't envy him or his staff in trying to pull it together. But it may be that if, as we're getting close to the election, whatever mode we choose, we see the voters heading in another direction. If they head in the direction of going to by mail voting, that's bad because we have processing issues, and that's going to be difficult. But if they break in the direction of in-person voting, if the health issues decline, if the population becomes more comfortable, and we've all seen grocery stores. Frankly, I'd vote and I like to vote in person. And over the years, I'm not sure that any of the voting sites that I've gone to have been as crowded as the grocery stores that I've seen during the pandemic. So if the people move in that direction, the question in my mind is, as to both of those scenarios, can we pivot to accommodate it? Is there any expansion capability in what we'll have? And I worry that if we send out the ballots, if we use that option, we're not going to have that ability to expand. If we're thinking about it and we're citing for a robust, not a traditional, but a robust turnout, I'm thinking that we'll be at the same time considering, okay, now suppose we have an additional X percentage of people showing up. Can we accommodate that? And it becomes easier to do it as we move into October. As all of us who are involved here know, and I said this to, I believe I said it at the legislature, and I've said it in many conversations. There are a lot of people who vote in elections and understand the process of voting. There are many people who run in elections or associated with the people who are running in elections, and they work elections in that sense. But it was not until I came onto this board that I realized how immensely complex it is to actually run an election, and the amount of lead time that's required for all the pieces to fall properly into place. And that's what worries me for November. So my preference is going to be for 2, but only because I think at this moment, I believe at this moment, that we can pivot more quickly, more robustly into accommodating larger numbers of people. That doesn't mean that we're writing off segments of the population. The communications plan, we already intend to have that beefed up. The mailings have to go out. It may be that this will be an election where voters will need to take responsibility for themselves. And it's our job to make sure they have the tools to do that. The instructions, the documents, the websites, whatever it may be. And ultimately, I have confidence in the people who actually run elections. So that would be where I end up, kind of through a long, tortured process, and not for any dramatic reason. That it gets me there is process, and worrying about what will happen in October. With that, and with that being known by the board, or the opinions being made by the board, that will be incorporated into the report, and will be part of what goes to the governor.
Mr. Chairman?
So, yes, sir.
This is PJ. I'm confused on that last point.
Yeah.
It sounds as though, as you polled the members, you had 3 people for option 2, 2 members for option 3. It requires 4 votes to do anything.
If we were to take an action, but there's no action being taken here. We're not making a decision. We're simply providing information, and the information that's being provided is both the data in the various aspects of the report and the information that we've been discussing today and the information that's put in there with an indication of how the board felt about it.
Is a recommendation?
There wouldn't be a recommendation.
Okay.
The concluding paragraph would be more along the lines of that, the board had the different perspectives that it did, and these were the numbers, and this is the way that the board came out of it. So there wouldn't be a recommended. Had we all agreed 5-0, the paragraph would look very similar. Would have had the word recommendation in it, but there wouldn't be a recommendation in this. It would simply be, here's what we got. Go.
Mr. Chairman, would it be safe to say that the board unanimously did not recommend option 1?
I think it's implicit, but we can certainly make it formal. Just to get that on the record, and we always want to protect the record. Is there anyone on the board who favors option number 1? Hearing none, then it is the sense of the board that option number 1 is disfavored. Does anyone disagree with that? Hearing none. So we would put in the report that option 1 was disfavored and the board split on the others. That's a good point, Bill. Thank you. Anybody else have anything on this matter?
Mike,
Okay.
this is Andrea.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I jump in for a second? I think this is a matter of housekeeping, but to the extent the governor has asked the board for a report on the June 2nd primary, and I understand the board's considering including information about the November election, but I understand that there's not a supermajority as required by statute for a board-issued recommendation, but to the extent the report is being submitted by the board, I think it probably behooves the board to vote to authorize the issuance of that report or transmittal of that report to the governor, even if there's not a sense, even if it's one that just says the board could not come to a recommendation. Here are the issues raised as to each option by the board at its meeting of June 30th, if you follow what I'm saying.
I do. It's an excellent point, as usual. So I think the way to fix that, does anyone on the board, you've heard indicated how this will be written up, and we'll send it around to the board over the next few hours just to make sure everybody's comfortable, or by tomorrow anyway, everybody's comfortable with the wording of it, that last paragraph. But is there anyone who objects to transmittal of the report?
Mike, this is Malcolm. I don't object. Sure. I'm just wondering, this was classed as a special emergency meeting, is that correct?
Yes, emergency meeting. If we were to take a vote,
qualify as a special meeting. I didn't say, because we don't take a vote at emergency or special meetings, if I understand correctly.
As I recall, was that Andrea in the background?
Yeah, I can answer that question, Mike.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Malcolm, that is true for special meetings that are announced less than, I believe the number is 3 days or less before the meeting takes place. I think otherwise, under the bylaws, the board, if more than 3 days notice is provided, the board is able to take a vote. And it might be 48 hours. I can't remember the exact number, but given that the meeting, public notice was issued about the meeting on Friday, that doesn't prevent the board from, the board is free to take votes at this special meeting.
Okay, with the 3-day rule, okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. So does any member of the board object to transmittal of the report as was indicated in the last two comments by the chair?
This is PJ.
Sure.
No, I have no objection to voting to transmit the report, but I want to reserve the right to read the full report before it's transmitted.
I understand. Andrea, don't we have a thing where we can vote by email? Isn't that part of our, I seem to recollect we've done that in the past.
I think for administrative type matters, I think the board has to vote on the policy, so to speak, in open meeting. It can direct the staff to, make changes to the report, to, author the report in such a manner as to reflect what was discussed at the meeting along the lines of X, Y, and Z. And then the report can be circulated, and the board can say by email, yes, this is how we had asked that it be done. But the policy decisions need to be made in open meeting. I would even say that, I think to the extent that can be avoided, what happens, Mike, as you know, is that, minutes often get circulated for comment by email, but then the minutes are actually voted on at the meetings themselves. I would prefer to have the policy be voted on here. And if there is an issue where the members cannot, it is apparent to a member that the administrative aspect of putting pen to paper along the lines of what the board authorized at the meeting has not been followed according to that member's views. I would say the best course at that point, as inconvenient as it might be to call another emergency meeting and rectify it. But I'm hoping that you can all avoid that.
Well, we do love them so, though. So it's going to be a tough call on that one, Andrea. All right. So, Counselor, do you want me to ask for a formal motion then to transmit the report with the comments as have been stated by the board members, in this open session?
If that's the motion, yes. If that's the motion that you want to bring, and if that's what the board wishes to vote on, then I think that would be a more appropriate manner of giving the board's approval to the report.
Okay, but that does the job, is what I'm asking.
I think so. Because I think the record kind of reflects what's been discussed. I think the record also reflects that the board could not come to a consensus as to a recommendation. In your motion, Mike, you might want to specify those aspects of the discussion that you wish to be included. Specifically that the board, for instance, that the board could not come to a supermajority in support of any of the options presented in the report. Just as much clarity as you could provide to the staff to, modify the draft that you've all received so that it adequately reflects the policy that the board is voting on.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, this is PJ. On that last point Andrea made, just for clarity, on the document that Nikki sent out, it has the three options, advantages and disadvantages. Under option 3, under disadvantages, number 3, it says, we will be sending out over 2 million live ballots. Well, first of all, that number 2 million is not accurate. I think it's closer to 4 million, whatever the number is, it should read that. And I said this before, I don't mind. I think we should talk about in this report factual things, data, but this sentence that says anecdotal information and media reports indicate that a number of these ballots will be discarded or may be intercepted. I don't think that belongs in this report. That is what it is. Anecdotal media reports, and I don't even know what it means by will be discarded. I'm mailed a ballot. I choose not to vote, so I throw it away, or maybe intercepted. I don't even know what that means. There's a very speedy.
Okay. Oh, wait a minute. I was looking at the wrong piece of paper. Okay. So as to option 3B3, that should be over 3 million. To more accurately say, to come close to 4, but it's certainly going to be over 3 million. And hold on. In oh. Okay. Same. It was the sentence behind that one.
And I also have a question about option number 2, A3.
Okay, go ahead.
It says the local boards will offer as many vote centers as they can reserve, staff, train, supply, and support. I do think there should be with the approval of the State Board of Elections.
I agree with that. I think maybe to address, I see exactly what EJ is saying on 3B3, and maybe an easier, what is the typical turnout of a presidential general? What percentage?
Just Nikki, it's hard, it's upper 70 percentile, maybe 80.
Okay, so if it's 80%, whatever number you say we will be sending out, let's say it's 5 million ballots, that would leave 1 million ballots unaccounted for. Live ballots unaccounted for. That's not anecdotal, that's a fact. And I think that gets your point and meets PJ's criterion, which I agree with.
Okay, so Billy, you're saying you think it should stay in the way it is, but the number of millions should be changed.
No, I'm saying get rid of the anecdotal information to indicate that a number of these ballots, get rid of that part of the line and just say, we will be sending out 5 million live ballots. With a expected voter turnout of 80%, this would leave approximately 1 million ballots, live ballots unaccounted for. That's just a fact.
PJ?
Can you explain that fact to me a second? So 5 million ballots are sent out. Where do you get 1 million? Where do you get 1/5?
So the voter turnout, Nikki just said, could be as high as 80% for a presidential general. So if 20% of the ballots did not come back voted, that would be 1 million of the 5 million. Whatever 20% of that actual number that we'll be sending out in live ballots.
PJ?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about it. I see the math you're using. Okay.
And that way it's factual, PJ. It's not anecdotal. We're not saying what'll happen to them. We're just saying they're out there.
This is Kelly. We could possibly use numbers from the primary. I mean, we know exactly how many unmarked ballots we mailed out. We know how many ballots came back to the local board either voted or as returned to a local board as undeliverable, so they're back in the custody of the local board. And the difference between those two numbers is how many unmarked ballots were discarded or still sitting on people's desks like they are in my house.
Okay.
And just say that was the fact in the presidential primary on June 2nd. And we don't know what the numbers are going to be for the presidential general. we know with pretty good authority that they're going to be bigger.
And that's why I was trying to use a number of a similar election, obviously not similar in style, but a presidential general would bring more people out than a presidential primary and include the
right. So what we could do is we could cite the facts from the primary, and that gets to PJ's concern. We want to be talking about facts and not myths. The facts from the primary, and then say in the general, we anticipate turnout of up close to 80%, and that would leave whatever number we come up with.
PJ?
Not returned.
I'm trying to think of what we're trying to say here.
Mm-hmm.
It's under disadvantages, PJ.
Can someone read what you were going to, how you would state that?
It would be, I think, we will be sending out around 5 million live ballots. In the June 3rd election, so many ballots were sent out, and there were only X number of votes total. Or returned, I guess we know what they've been returned. So the X number of ballots returned. That leaves a discrepancy, whatever the number is. And then saying in the November election, with an 80% turnout, a number of those ballots will discarded or may be intercepted or will not be returned. Probably better to say will not be returned.
Better to say may not be returned. We don't know for sure. We can't predict the future.
That's my line. And B, we're extrapolating from the math. So, it's implicit that we're using the math. We don't know the year turnout will be 80% either. I mean, it's a good solid, it's a sound number to use. It's really just demonstrating that we have a lot of ballots that are out there that they don't get accounted for.
I mean, quite frankly, if the turnout was much higher than 80%, you would think there was some fraud because it would go against historically every election for the last, I don't know how many presidential cycles, right? So if participation came in at 95%, that would scare me.
Well, okay. So, PJ, how does
that, or we could say that the population was more. I said either that, or you can say the population is more interested in this election than any other election in the past.
That would be the other interpretation of it.
I guess.
Although we've had historic elections, almost every presidential election is a historical election when you come right down to it. And I would have expected the 12 election, that would have generated the largest turnout that we're going to see. But percentage-wise, because the population would have increased by between 12 and now, number of voters. But PJ, to your concern, does it sound reasonable? And staff can formulate that so that it's smoother than what we're doing here. But essentially, it'd be something along the lines of, in the June 3rd election, so many ballots were issued and so many ballots were returned. We will be sending out around 5 million live ballots in the November election, and with an 80% turnout, X number of those ballots would not be returned.
That's fine.
Something like that.
That's fine.
Okay. Mickey, did you get that?
Not be returned.
I did, thank you.
No. Okay. Okay. All right. So any other points like that as to any issues? Okay.
Just 1 minute. I think, PJ, didn't you have a comment on option 2 about the state board approving the locations? I think.
Yeah, you did. 2A3.
Yeah,
And the end of the sentence should be with approval of the State Board of Elections.
yes.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm. I'm just working on some wording here. I'll try this and see how everybody feels about it. The motion would be that the staff is to prepare the report with revisions as stated by the board. That's what we just did. And we'll note that the board did not come to a supermajority conclusion, and that the report is to be transmitted with a sense of the closing comments by the members, by each of the members. How's that?
Sounds good.
I have a question about that.
Yeah, go ahead, Nikki, go ahead.
So, with the sense of each board member, does that mean you want to summarize each board member's decision, or just collectively that there were, these two were this option and these two were this option? I wasn't sure how detailed you want it to be when you said each board member.
I don't think we want it to be very detailed.
Okay.
I don't think that there's an interest in that. Anybody that's interested is going to go back and listen to the audio, and they'll get all of everything that we said. So I'm just thinking, because of the way we're doing it, each member had, although there were obviously there were commonalities across all 5, and then also within the 2 voting groups, but each member also had some distinctive things to say. So I would suggest that we say, we don't have to identify the members, but the members, and or we could, I guess, would be the easiest way. Member so-and-so said, indicated thus. I'm thinking 1 or 2 sentences per person. Is anybody uncomfortable with that? Okay, anybody have a better idea than that? Dang. Okay. So the motion then, and I'll repeat it one more time. The motion would be that the state board directs the staff to report, to prepare the report with revisions as stated by the board, and will note that the board did not come to a supermajority conclusion, and the staff will transmit the report with a sense of the closing comments by each of the members. How's that sound?
That sounds, this is PJ, that sounds fine. I just, one slight modification.
Sure.
I know the governor requested this report, and we're going to be complying and sending it to him. And I don't know whether it needs to be in this motion, but I think a copy of the report should go to the following individuals: the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, the minority Senate leader, and the minority House leader.
I'm fine with that. Well, let's think for a second. It's not like everybody didn't know it, because Open Meetings Act. I'm thinking in terms of formality. The governor requested a report. We're sending it to the governor. or a state agency, do we at that point automatically send it to the other people? I'm not, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they shouldn't get the report. It's more of a, chain of command or, a formality thing. If the governor says, give me this report, you obviously give the governor the report. Do you then simultaneously deliver the report to other individuals? I mean, and that would be the legislature. That's what you're really talking about.
Yeah.
You deliver it to legislature as well. And obviously they have an interest in it. They're going to get it. But I guess the question is, does it go to the governor who gives it to them, or is the state, in other words, would the state board be presumptuous in responding to the governor by sending the report also to the legislature? And again, the legislature is going to get the report. I'm just thinking in terms of formalities, not in terms of substantive actions. Anybody got any thoughts on that? Anybody have any background in this stuff? You guys are a really great help here.
Since I suggested it, I just think, given that, yes, I know the governor requested the report, and he has the authority to decide how the election is going to be, but we also have this branch of government that is the policy makers and statutory makers. And we've been communicated by a lot of people, including leadership, minority and majority. I'm not saying mail it out to all, 188. I'm saying
no. I know.
By doing the legislative leaders, minority and majority, I think it's just it's really kind of courtesy.
And that's exactly the word that I was thinking. That we're not sending a report to them because we're an executive branch. We're not sending the report to them, the legislature, but we're providing them a courtesy copy of the report that goes to the governor. What do you think? Anybody?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Well, you and I are the only. Okay. Well, that's the way we'll do it.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, that's the way we'll do it. And again, this was a formality issue, not a substantive issue. Just so I've said that 5 times now. I'm confident I'm going to be asked about it sometime in the future here in the next couple of months. Okay. So we will do that. We'll send courtesy copies. Also, Nikki, we received correspondence. That correspondence has all been posted. As a courtesy to staff, at least in the governor's report, I would like to, if we can, attach that correspondence so that we've been referring to it. We specifically referred a lot to the Mayo report. And a lot of this stuff went to everybody anyway. But having been on staff of various kinds, a lot of times it's just kind of nice if somebody gives you the whole package and you don't have to dig through for yourself and pull that all up. So if we could do it, I think that would be a good and a useful thing to do.
Of course.
All right. Anything else from anybody? And then I'll propose I'll ask for the motion. Anything else? Okay. The chair at this time would entertain a motion as follows: that the State Board of Elections directs the staff to prepare the report to the governor with revisions as stated by the board, and will note, and staff is to note, that the board did not come to a supermajority conclusion and will include a sense of comments by each of the members and transmit that report to the governor when completed. And the completion of the report will be after each member has had an opportunity to review the final draft prior to it being sent. May I have such a motion?
This is PJ. So moved.
Second.
Moved as
Bill
second. All those in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
PJ, Bill?
Aye. Yeah.
Okay. All members having approved, the motion is passed. Andrea, did we dot in all the i's and cross the t's?
I think so.
Okay. I'll always check with you. All right, next item on the agenda, schedule next meeting. We have a meeting scheduled for the late July. I believe it is for the 23rd of July. I'm willing to take wagers on whether we reach that before we have another meeting. But at this point, we already have another meeting scheduled, so unless someone sees a need for a meeting, at this moment, sees a need, we'll simply allow the 23rd July to stand. If there's no objection to that. Hearing none, no objection. Next meeting is scheduled for 23rd July, or not, as the events dictate. Item 5, closed session. I don't believe we need that today. And that leaves us at the very end of the agenda. I believe we've taken care of all business. Nikki, is there anything that's out there that we have not tied off? And Andrea?
I don't believe so. Thank you.
Okay. Andrea, anything not tied off?
Not from my end.
Okay. And if you guys are good with it, I'm good with it. The chair at this time would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? None. Motion carries. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all very much. This was yet again another one of the tough ones, and I appreciate everybody, and I appreciate the tenor of the discourse that went on as well, both on a personal and a professional level. So thank you all. Take care, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
Thanks.
And with that,
Okay, thank you,
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. If you run for office, I'll vote for you.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Only by mail.
Hey, a vote is a vote is a vote.
You're right.
There he is. That's right. Okay. Y'all take care
Take
now.
care, everyone.